The human colony on Thorn 7 was a quiet outpost nestled on the edge of the known galaxy, tucked away from the war raging between ancient alien factions. The colonists were simple people, farmers, miners, and a few scattered engineers. They had no interest in galactic politics until that fateful day. It started with a strange signal. At first, it was just a faint hum, a cryptic static that lingered in the background of their regular communications. The technicians at the main communications tower dismissed it as a malfunction. But then, something unusual happened. The signal repeated itself. Engineer Leela Carter, a sharp-minded, no-nonsense technician, was the first to notice the anomaly. As a specialist in alien languages, she was intrigued when the signal began to take shape into something that could almost be translated. It wasn't just noise. There was a message embedded within the static. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized it was a distress call. Rushing to the central hub, Leela called for backup, her hands shaking as she began working with the data. Within hours, the message was fully deciphered. It was a chilling warning. An ancient weapon capable of annihilating entire star systems was being activated. But what terrified Leela even more was the source of the weapon, a space station called Kryn, located on the edge of an ancient alien empire that had been in a long-standing war with the other galactic powers. The message's final words were a plea for help. If you have the ability to stop it, please do so. It will be the end of us all. Before Leela could even process what she had learned, the ground shook. A massive explosion tore through the atmosphere, sending debris crashing across the colony. Thorn 7 was under attack. Alien ships, sleek and menacing, descended from the sky, firing deadly plasma bolts into the colony's defenses. A hoarse, crackling voice from the speakers warned the colonists to evacuate. But it was too late. The enemy was already on them. Humanity was ill-prepared. With little to no military presence, the colony stood no chance against the overwhelming assault. Lila's mind raced as she realized that the weapon they had discovered was somehow linked to this attack. The aliens, whoever they were, would stop at nothing to keep it hidden. As the buildings around them crumbled, Captain Alex Carter, Leela's older brother, a decorated officer from the Earth military, rallied the few remaining soldiers. Together with a small group of engineers and scientists, they fought to defend what was left of their home. But it became clear that this was just the beginning. The enemy was here to erase every trace of humanity's involvement in the discovery. In the chaos, Leela managed to send a final transmission to Earth, broadcasting the decoded distress signal. Her last message was a desperate plea. We didn't start this war, but we will end it. In the aftermath, the ruins of Thorn 7 were left smoldering. But the survivors knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just an attack. It was a message. Whoever was behind this conflict saw humanity as a threat that had to be silenced before it could stand in the way of their plans. And so, the real battle began. The devastation of Thorn 7 left the remaining human survivors in a state of shock. A few hundred souls, scattered and broken, gathered in the ruins of their shattered colony. Among them was Captain Alex Carter, who, despite his wounds, remained the unshakable leader they needed. He stood tall in front of the remnants of the colony, his face grim as he surveyed the damage. His younger sister, Leela, was beside him, clutching the decoded message they had intercepted, the key to understanding the conflict that had nearly wiped them out. "We can't stay here," Alex said quietly. "If they wanted to wipe us off the map, it's not over. We need to find a way to fight back." But where to begin? The humans were outgunned and outclassed, and they had no idea who had launched the attack, let alone how to combat the weapon they had learned about. The galaxy was vast and full of warring factions with technology far beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed of. That's when Leela came to him with an idea. The message they had intercepted was not just a distress call. It contained coordinates that led to an alien-controlled planet where an unlikely ally might be found. The Rethan, An ancient species who had once held sway over vast stretches of the galaxy had been rumored to possess knowledge of forgotten technology. If they could convince the Rethan to join their cause, it could turn the tide in their favor. Despite the risk, Alex knew it was their best shot. He quickly organized a small team. Layla, a group of engineers and scientists, and a handful of military veterans. Together, they boarded the last functioning ship left on Forn 7. The Vanguard, an aging freighter that had been retrofitted for combat in a desperate attempt to fend off the alien assault. The journey to the Rethan world, known as Joreth, was perilous. The Vanguard was barely spaceworthy, and the crew had little experience with intergalactic travel. But there was no turning back. As they crossed into deep space, they encountered strange phenomena. Pulses of energy from hidden alien fleets, sudden waves of electromagnetic interference. It was as if the galaxy itself was watching them, waiting to see if humanity would rise to the challenge. Upon reaching Joreth, the team was greeted by the Rethan, a species tall and imposing, with skin that shimmered like liquid silver. Their leader, a dignified and ancient Rethan named General Varnak, regarded the humans with both curiosity and disdain. The Rethan had been isolated for centuries, reclusive in the wake of their own near destruction during the early days of the Galactic War. They had little interest in becoming involved in another conflict, but humanity's arrival and the revelations they brought stirred something within Varnak. "There is something different about you," Varnak said, his voice deep and resonant. "You have the fire of a species that refuses to be broken. But we do not fight for others. What is it you truly seek, humans?" Alex stood tall, despite the overwhelming odds stacked against them. "We didn't start this war, but we're here to end it. We need your help. The galaxy is on the brink of annihilation, and if we don't act, everything will burn. We can't fight this alone." For a long moment, Varnak said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Perhaps you are right. We will help you, but understand this. Our kind has not fought for millennia. Our power has been dulled by time. You may find the path ahead more treacherous than you expect." The alliance was formed. The Rethan, with their advanced knowledge of ancient technology, would help the humans uncover secrets to stop the Galactic War, and the weapon threatening to destroy them all. But as the humans and Rethan prepared for their next move, they were unaware that their enemies had already taken notice of their actions. A shadowy figure within the ranks of the Galactic warlords had learned of the humans' involvement, and they were far from pleased. The alliance with the Rethan was fragile at best. General Varnak's people were ancient and proud, reluctant to involve themselves in the war once more, but the danger posed by the weapon humanity had discovered was too great for even the Rethan to ignore. They had their own reasons for wanting the Galactic War to end. The memories of their people's near extinction during a previous war were still fresh in their minds. But even with their ancient technology and vast knowledge, they were not the unstoppable force they once were. The humans, under Captain Alex Carter's leadership, had gathered what they could from the Rethan, but it wasn't enough. They needed more firepower, more resources, and a way to directly strike at the heart of the enemy factions that were determined to keep the weapon hidden. Varnak, though reluctant, agreed to provide them with critical intelligence, and the humans were soon on their way to an important military target, an enemy weapons facility located on a desolate asteroid belt known as Trask 9. The mission was simple: infiltrate the facility, sabotage their operations, and steal any valuable data that might lead to more information about the weapon's location. But simple missions had a way of going wrong in deep space. As they approached Trask 9 aboard the Vanguard, Leela studied the data feeds. Her fingers flew over the controls as she tried to decrypt the enemy's comms traffic. She had been working nonstop since they left Joreth, her mind exhausted but sharp. She felt the weight of the situation pressing on her. One wrong move, and they could all be dead. "Captain, I'm reading several fleets in the vicinity," Leela said, voice tight with tension. "It's a trap. They know we're coming." Alex's jaw tightened. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We can't afford to be caught in their net." The Vanguard dropped out of warp space and into the asteroid belt, the ship's hull groaning under the sudden shift. Trask 9 was a craggy, barren rock, its surface littered with mining debris and derelict ships. The facility was well hidden inside a network of caves, shielded by dense asteroid fields that made a direct approach nearly impossible. The team would have to go in undercover, stealthily infiltrating through a series of tunnels that led to the heart of the facility. They launched in small pods, using the chaos of the asteroid belt to mask their approach. But even with the element of surprise, they were met with resistance almost immediately. As the human pods streaked toward the entrance, enemy ships, sleek, heavily armed, emerged from the debris, cutting off their escape route. "Move fast, everyone," Alex barked into the comms. "We don't have much time." The pods landed with a jarring thud on the surface of Trask 9. The team was quick to disembark, their boots crunching on the rough ground as they sprinted for the tunnels. They moved swiftly, guided by Lila's decrypted map, but the enemy was closing in fast. Inside the facility, it was eerily silent. The humans' boots echoed through the corridors, their weapons drawn, eyes scanning every corner for danger. They'd found what they were looking for: a massive data center, likely the heart of the weapons manufacturing operation. It was here that they would find the intelligence they needed to locate the weapon. But as they accessed the data, the ground shook violently. The facility's alarms began to blare, and the team knew they were not alone. "We're out of time," shouted Alex. "Get the data, now." Lila worked furiously at the terminal, downloading everything she could. But before they could finish, a group of heavily armed alien soldiers stormed the chamber, guns raised. The humans returned fire, the air thick with smoke, and the crackle of energy blasts. It was chaos. "Go. I'll cover you," Alex ordered, his rifle blazing as he held the soldiers back. The rest of the team scrambled to gather the data and retreat. But it was clear the enemy was ready for them. They weren't just here to defend a weapons facility, they were protecting something far more important. As the humans made their escape, a massive explosion ripped through the facility, sending debris flying in all directions. The Vanguard was waiting for them, but the enemy fleet had closed in, cutting off their exit. They had to fight their way out. "Brace for impact," Alex shouted, as the Vanguard fired its thrusters and broke free from the asteroid field. The battle in the void was fierce. The enemy ships, though outnumbered, were relentless. With every passing moment, the humans pushed harder, their weapons tearing through the alien fleet. But they couldn't stay in the asteroid belt forever. The Vanguard was damaged, and the escape routes were closing fast. In the end, they managed to break free, their ship barely holding together as they made a blind jump into deep space. But as they caught their breath, something new became clear. The weapon was closer than they had thought. The enemies they had encountered weren't just defending an arms factory. They were guarding a secret that could change everything. The Galactic War was no longer just a political struggle. It was personal. And the humans had just become central players in a game they didn't fully understand, but would soon change the course of forever. The Vanguard limped into hyperspace, its hull pockmarked by enemy fire, its systems on the brink of failure. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. The crew was battered and weary, but there was no time for rest. They had gathered vital intelligence from the weapons facility on Trask 9, but they still didn't have a clear path to the weapon, or who exactly was behind the devastating war. That was something they needed to uncover urgently. Leela, her hands still trembling from the adrenaline of the escape, pored over the data they'd retrieved. She was in the ship's control room, surrounded by blinking consoles and screens, her eyes darting from one line of code to the next. Captain Alex Carter stood behind her, his arms crossed, watching her work with quiet intensity. He had seen the horrors of war firsthand, but this, the shadowy, faceless forces pulling the strings, was a different kind of enemy. "Anything useful in that mess?" Alex asked, his voice low but steady. Leela paused, staring at a complex web of encrypted data. I think so. It's fragmented, but there's a pattern emerging. These weapons aren't just part of some larger war. They're part of a much older conspiracy, and it involves something, or someone, called the Cabal. The Cabal? Alex repeated, his brow furrowing. He had heard rumors of ancient organizations pulling the strings behind galactic wars, but he had always assumed they were just stories, myths to explain the otherwise inexplicable. Who are they? I'm still trying to piece it together, Layla replied, her fingers racing across the controls. But the data shows that the Cabal is not just some rogue faction. They're ancient, older than any known race in this galaxy. They've manipulated countless wars, engineered conflicts for millennia, and they've kept their existence hidden, even from the most powerful factions. Alex's jaw tightened. The war they were fighting wasn't just about defending humanity anymore. It was about confronting an enemy that had been shaping the galaxy for eons, staying in the shadows while others fought their battles. Leela continued, her voice steady but filled with disbelief. What's worse is that the weapon we're looking for, the one that could end all life as we know it, was created by them. But it's not just a weapon of mass destruction. It's a tool of control, a way to manipulate entire star systems. If they activate it, they'll have the power to erase or dominate anyone in their path. Alex's eyes narrowed. So, we're not just stopping a weapon. We're stopping a galaxy-wide coup. Leela nodded grimly. Exactly. And that's not all. There's a second piece to the puzzle. A map. A map to the Cabal's true stronghold. Somewhere in the uncharted regions of space, where no one dares to go. That's where the weapon is hidden. And that's where we need to go to stop them. Captain Carter knew they had no choice but to follow this trail, even if it led them into the heart of the galaxy's darkest secrets. But as they set course for the uncharted region, a chilling thought crept into his mind. How many others had tried to uncover the Cabal's secrets and failed? As the Vanguard entered the unknown void, the crew's unease grew. Their course was set, but the closer they got to their destination, the more dangerous their journey became. They were no longer just running from enemies. They were racing against time and a shadowy organization that had controlled the galaxy from the shadows for far too long. The map they had found in the Trask 9 facility led them to an ancient, ruined world known as Kaner, a desolate place shrouded in darkness. According to the data, it was once the site of an enormous Cabal fortress, now long abandoned, or so it seemed. But as they approached the planet, strange things began to happen. Their sensors went haywire. The ship's systems malfunctioned at random. It felt as though the universe itself was rejecting their presence. It was as if the Cabal was watching, waiting, and ready to destroy anyone who dared uncover their long-forgotten secrets. The crew braced themselves for what lay ahead. They were about to enter the heart of the Cabal's legacy, and they knew one thing for certain. The danger was far greater than anything they had ever faced before. In the dead of night, as they approached Kaner, Leela found something unsettling in the data, a warning. One that had been encrypted in layers upon layers, as if trying to prevent anyone from discovering it. It was a message, not from the Cabal, but from someone, or something, else. Those who seek the truth will not live to see the dawn. As the Vanguard descended toward the planet, the crew realized they were no longer alone in the void. Something was coming for them. Something ancient. Something that had been waiting. And if they didn't move fast, they would be the next to disappear into the shadows of history. The Vanguard lurched violently as another wave of enemy fire slammed into its hull, sending sparks flying from the control panels. Inside the ship, alarms blared and flashing red lights lit up every corner of the cramped cockpit. Captain Alex Carter's hands tightened on the helm, but there was little he could do. The ship was barely holding together, and the enemy ships were closing in fast. We can't keep outrunning them forever. Alex growled, his voice steady despite the chaos. We need to make a stand, or we're not going to make it out of here. Leela Carter, sitting at the navigation console, glanced up. Her face was pale, but her focus was unwavering. "I'm rerouting power to the shields, but they're barely holding. We can't take another hit like that." Alex's mind raced. Their only hope lay in the uncharted region of space they were heading toward, the mysterious planet Caner. According to the intelligence they'd gathered, the planet was once the site of an ancient cable stronghold, and hidden within its ruins could be the key to defeating their enemies. It was humanity's only chance to stop the weapon and the dark forces behind the war. But it was also a dangerous gamble. No one had ever returned from Caner. "Prepare for a jump to the Caner coordinates," Alex ordered. "We don't have a choice." Leela hesitated, her eyes scanning the systems. "Captain, the navigation systems are unstable. I might not be able to pinpoint the exact location if we jump now." "We don't have time for that," Alex said sharply. "We jump now, or we don't jump at all." With a grim nod, Leela initiated the jump. The ship's engines flared to life, and the Vanguard surged forward, jumping into the unknown. The crew braced for the shockwave, the disorienting pull of hyperspace. For a few harrowing seconds, the stars around them stretched and distorted, until the ship finally broke free from hyperspace and emerged into a dark, silent expanse of space. Caner loomed ahead, a desolate, barren world shrouded in shadow, its surface marred by the remnants of ancient structures. A thick, ominous fog hung in the atmosphere, swirling like a living thing. "Where are the enemy ships?" Leela asked, her voice trembling with a mix of relief and apprehension. Alex scanned the surrounding space. The enemy had not followed them into the uncharted region. For now, they were safe. But the silence only heightened the tension. "Keep the scanners active," Alex ordered. "I don't trust this place. If they were watching us, they'll know we're here." As they approached the planet, the feeling of being watched intensified. The very air around Caner seemed to hum with ancient energy, a presence that made every member of the crew uneasy. Something about this place felt wrong. But there was no turning back now. The Vanguard touched down on the planet's surface with a jolt, its landing gear scraping against the barren ground. The ship's engines powered down, and for a moment, the crew sat in stunned silence. They had made it, barely. Lila was the first to move. She gathered her gear and stood, eyes fixed on the dark horizon. "We're not alone. I can feel it." Alex joined her, his expression grim. "We knew this wouldn't be easy. Stay sharp. Let's find what we came for." The air outside was thick with dust and ash, and the terrain was rocky and uneven. Ancient ruins stretched across the landscape. Towering stone structures, their surfaces cracked and weathered by time. It was clear that this was once a place of great power, but now it was little more than a graveyard of forgotten empires. The team moved cautiously, their weapons drawn and their senses heightened. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound amplified in the eerie stillness of Caner. It was as though the planet itself was alive, watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. As they ventured deeper into the ruins, Leela's handheld device began to beep, signaling that they were approaching a hidden chamber. Her heart raced. Could this be the secret they had been searching for? The information that would lead them to the Kibble's heart. They found the entrance, an ancient doorway, half buried under centuries of dust and debris. Leela reached forward and pressed a series of symbols on the console beside it. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit hallway that descended deep beneath the surface. "Stay close," Alex said, his voice low but commanding. "We don't know what we're walking into." The team descended into the depths of Caner, unaware that their presence had already been detected. As they reached the heart of the ancient stronghold, something stirred in the shadows. The cabal was not as dormant as they had hoped. Something was awakening, and it had been waiting for them. The deeper they ventured into the ancient stronghold beneath Caner, the more the oppressive silence seemed to close in around them. The air grew colder, and the walls were covered in strange, glowing symbols, their meanings long forgotten. The hum of the planet's energy seemed to pulse through the stone, vibrating under their feet, as though the planet itself was alive, watching them. The team moved cautiously, weapons drawn, every step echoing in the narrow passageways. Leela led the way, her handheld device glowing softly in the darkness. It continued to beep in time with the pulse of the planet's energy. Her heart pounded in her chest. She was getting closer to what they had come for, but a nagging sense of dread gnawed at her. It felt as though they were intruding on something that had been waiting, biding its time. And now, they had disturbed it. "We're almost there," she whispered, turning back to Alex. "Just a little further." Alex nodded, his jaw tight. "Stay alert. We don't know what kind of defenses they left behind." The team continued down the winding passage, the walls narrowing as they descended. The air grew thick with an unnatural cold, and the once subtle hum of the planet's energy grew louder, more insistent. Suddenly, they reached the end of the corridor. A massive chamber opened up before them, its walls lined with ancient technology, now covered in dust and decay. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and on it, a strange crystalline object pulsed with an eerie blue light. It was the size of a large gemstone, but its surface was etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. It was beautiful and terrifying. Leela's eyes widened. "This is it. This is what we've been looking for." Alex stepped forward, but as he did, a strange noise echoed through the chamber, like a deep, resonant growl. His instincts screamed at him to stop, but it was too late. From the shadows of the chamber, a series of glowing red eyes appeared, followed by the unmistakable shape of heavily armored figures. The cable's guardians had awakened. "Get back!" Alex shouted, drawing his weapon and aiming at the advancing figures. But the guardians were fast, too fast. They were humanoid in shape, but their armor was unlike anything humanity had seen. It seemed to absorb the light around them, shifting like liquid metal. Their movements were swift and lethal, and within moments, they had surrounded the team. Leela stepped back, her heart racing. She could feel the heat of their weapons and the weight of their presence. "We're outnumbered," she yelled. "We can't fight them all." Alex gritted his teeth. "We don't have a choice." He opened fire, the sound of plasma shots echoing through the chamber. The Guardians retaliated immediately, their weapons firing bolts of energy that struck the walls with a deafening crash. The Vanguard's crew fought back, but it was clear they were outmatched. Every shot they fired seemed to only slow the Guardians down, not stop them. These were no ordinary enemies. They were protectors of something far older and far more dangerous than anything they had encountered. As the battle raged on, Lila's eyes fell once more on the crystalline object on the pedestal. There had to be something they were missing, something that could give them a fighting chance. She sprinted toward the pedestal, hoping that the object might be the key to disabling the Guardians, or even the weapon they had come to find. But as her hand touched the crystal, a blinding light erupted from it, enveloping the entire chamber. The Guardians stopped, their movements stiffening as if under some kind of command. The light swirled around them, forming a barrier that kept the Vanguard's crew safe, but also immobilized the Guardians, freezing them in place. The light seemed to reverberate, like the pulse of the planet itself, resonating with ancient power. Leela's mind raced as she realized what was happening. The crystal wasn't just a weapon, it was a conduit. It was connected to the heart of Kaner, and it was unlocking something that had been dormant for centuries. She could feel the planet's energy flowing through her, and for a brief moment, a vision flashed before her eyes. The Cabal was not just a faction. They were an ancient race, one that had mastered technology so advanced it was indistinguishable from magic, and the crystal, it was their last, hidden artifact. It could control the very fabric of reality itself. "Everyone, back!" Leela shouted. "I think we just triggered something far bigger than we realize." Just as she spoke, The crystal pulsed once more, sending a shockwave through the room. The guardians were shattered into dust, their forms disintegrating before their eyes. The energy surge was enough to knock the crew back, and the entire chamber began to tremble. "Move," Alex barked. "We need to get out of here now." The Vanguard crew scrambled to retreat, but as they ran, the ground beneath their feet cracked open. A new force, darker and more powerful than anything they had faced before, stirred deep within Kaner's core. The Cabal's secrets had been awakened, and the planet, now fully alive, would not let them leave easily. The real war was just beginning, and humanity had unknowingly triggered a new, more dangerous chapter in the struggle for the galaxy's future. The tremors beneath their feet grew stronger as the crew of the Vanguard sprinted through the crumbling ruins of Kaner's underground labyrinth. The once dormant energy of the planet had awoken with the activation of the crystal, and now it was like the very core of the planet was alive, shaking in fury. The air was thick with dust, and the rumbling was deafening. Alex Carter didn't waste a moment. "Keep moving. We've triggered something, and we're not sticking around to find out what." Leela, struggling to keep up with the others, glanced back over her shoulder. The chamber they had left behind was now a mass of chaos. Stone walls cracked open like fragile shells, and the very ground itself seemed to be buckling. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever they had unleashed was not just a defensive measure. It was something far older, far more dangerous. The crystal had triggered something that had been waiting for centuries, and now that something was waking up, they were in its way. "Where's the exit?" Leela gasped, her lungs burning as she ran. "Straight ahead." Alex's voice cut through the chaos. "We're not far." The team pushed forward through the maze of corridors, their footsteps echoing in the eerie stillness. The walls, once imposing and dignified, now seemed fragile, as if they were on the brink of collapse. The faint, unnatural glow of the crystals embedded in the walls cast strange shadows, adding to the sense that they weren't just escaping the ruins. They were running from something far more intelligent, far more capable than they could imagine. Behind them, the sound of grinding stone and cracking earth grew louder. It was as if the planet was trying to close its doors on them, unwilling to let them leave. But they couldn't stop. If they did, they would be buried alive in the heart of Kaner. Then, out of nowhere, the floor beneath them cracked open with a deafening roar. Massive stone pillars shot up from the depths, rising to form a twisting, spiraling vortex of energy in the center of the chamber. The light from the crystal pulsed faster, its power feeding into the growing storm, and suddenly, the air was thick with static, the very atmosphere crackling with otherworldly energy. "This is it," Leela shouted, panic rising in her voice. "The planet's activating its core defenses. We need to get to the surface." As they neared the exit, the ground split open in front of them, creating an enormous chasm. From the depths below, the crew could hear something moving, something massive. The rumbling grew louder, and then, from the shadows of the chasm, a figure appeared. A towering creature, its body cloaked in ancient armor that shimmered with an unnatural cold light. Its eyes glowed a fiery red, and its presence seemed to consume the space around it. This was no ordinary guardian. This was something much older, much more powerful. The being stood, unmoving, at the edge of the chasm as though waiting for them. This is one of them," Leela whispered, her voice filled with awe and terror. "The Cabal's last defense." The creature didn't move, but its presence was suffocating, like a black hole pulling everything in. The team froze for a moment, fear gripping them. They had barely escaped the Guardians, but now they were facing something beyond even their comprehension. Alex stepped forward, his jaw tight with determination. "We don't have time for this," he said, his voice sharp. "We've got to get through it." Before anyone could react, the creature lifted its arm and raised it toward them. A powerful energy blast shot forth, barely missing them as they scattered, diving for cover. The impact shattered the walls around them, sending debris raining down like shrapnel. "We're not going to survive this fight," Leela shouted. "We need to find a way out." Alex gritted his teeth. "We will, but we have to keep moving. We're not going to make it back to the Vanguard if we don't." The ground continued to shake beneath their feet, and every step they took seemed to be pushing them closer to a final, inevitable confrontation with whatever force Kaner had become. They couldn't stay in the ruins for much longer. The storm was growing, and if they didn't escape, they would be buried under centuries of dirt and stone. A blinding flash of light pierced the chamber. The crystal's energy surged once more, and suddenly, the creature's armored form shattered into pieces, as if the light had burned it away. The energy from the crystal consumed the last of the Guardian's defense, and in a moment, the chasm began to close, slowly but surely. "Move," Alex shouted. "Now, before we're trapped." They sprinted toward the exit, the collapsing corridors hot on their heels. But as they neared the surface, they saw the sky of Kaner above them, shrouded in a red-tinted haze, the storm clouds swirling ominously. The planet was alive, but it was dying. And so were they, unless they could escape the storm that was now closing in on them. In the distance, the Vanguard was visible, hovering precariously on the edge of the crater. But they weren't out of danger yet. The storm had just begun, and Kaner was preparing to bury them, and their mission, under the weight of its secrets. The red-tinted sky above Kaner seemed to pulse with dark energy as the storm closed in. The ground shook beneath the crew's feet as they sprinted toward the Vanguard, now little more than a speck in the distance. The once pristine ruins were crumbling faster than they could escape, as if the planet itself was erasing its past. The storm was relentless, and every step forward felt like one step closer to being swallowed by the planet's fury. "We need to move faster," Alex shouted, his voice barely audible over the sound of the storm's deafening roar. The debris from the collapsing ruins flew around them like shrapnel, forcing the crew to dodge and duck to avoid getting struck. Leela's heart pounded in her chest as she glanced back. Behind them, the swirling vortex of energy from Kaner's core continued to grow, dark tendrils of power reaching outward, like a massive beast stretching its limbs. The storm was no longer just a force of nature. It was a sentient will, bent on preventing them from escaping. "If we don't make it to the ship in the next few minutes, we're not getting off this planet," Leela said, voice tight with urgency. Alex didn't need to hear it again. He pushed forward, his gaze fixed on the Vanguard as it loomed larger. Each step felt like an eternity as the wind howled and the ground cracked open beneath them. They were close, so close, but a loud explosion from behind them halted their forward momentum. A massive boulder, thrown by the force of the collapsing terrain, landed directly in their path. It sent a cloud of dust and debris into the air, obscuring their vision. "Go," Alex ordered, leading the way around the obstruction, but the storm had grown so intense that their route was blocked by falling debris at every turn. They were running out of time. As they reached the final stretch leading up to the ship, Layla's thoughts raced. She was the one who had activated the crystal. She had triggered the sequence that had awakened Kaner's wrath. The guilt was heavy, but she couldn't let it consume her now. If they didn't escape, it would all be for nothing. "We're not going to make it," one of the crew members, Sergeant O'Connor, yelled, his voice tinged with panic. The Vanguard's engines were sputtering, struggling to take off amid the violent tremors and intense wind gusts. Alex's jaw clenched. They had no choice now. The storm wasn't just an environmental hazard. It was a last-ditch effort by the cable to eliminate anyone who dared uncover their secrets. And Kaner was going to make sure they paid the price. "Leela, get to the cockpit," Alex barked. "We need to get the Vanguard in the air now. I'll cover you." The urgency in his voice pushed Leela into motion. She nodded quickly and sprinted toward the ship. The ship's hull groaned under the pressure of the storm, but the engines were alive. Barely. The countdown to liftoff had already started, but the increasing pressure from the storm was making it impossible for the Vanguard to take off. Inside the cockpit, Layla slid into the pilot's seat, her hands shaking as she gripped the controls. The storm was now battering the ship, and the sensors were going wild. She could feel the energy of Kaner seeping through the atmosphere, an unseen force trying to drag them back into the planet's depths. "Carter, we need another minute," she called through the comms. Her voice was frantic, but Alex's voice came through with cool resolve. "Do whatever it takes, Layla. We don't have a minute." With no other options, Leela punched in the emergency thruster override. She gritted her teeth, willing every ounce of strength into the ship's failing systems. The Vanguard's engines roared to life, their power barely enough to lift the ship off the ground. The ground rumbled once more as the planet seemed to scream its defiance, but the Vanguard was airborne, climbing through the storm. The ship shuddered, its hull barely holding together as Leela guided them through the chaos. Outside the window, the storm raged, but as they broke through the clouds, the atmosphere cleared. The twisted, barren landscape of Kaner stretched out below them, a silent testament to the planet's ancient, deadly power. The storm was still churning beneath them, but they were free. "We're out of range," Leela whispered, her voice filled with exhaustion and relief. "We made it." For a moment, no one spoke. The crew stared out at the fading world behind them, the dark clouds of Kaner's wrath disappearing into the distance. They had escaped, barely. The planet was silent now, as if it had accepted their departure, but something told Layla that they had only just begun to understand the true depth of what they had uncovered. Alex turned to face the crew, his face etched with weariness, but his eyes sharp with determination. "We've got a long road ahead of us. We've barely scratched the surface of this war." Leela looked at the map still glowing on her console. There was more to this, more secrets buried in the galaxy. And the Cabal, though weakened, was still out there, pulling strings, waiting. They had won this battle. But the war, it was only beginning. And humanity was the last line of defense.